This episode was brought to you by the Boot Chow Radio Podcast, episode 18. If you haven't seen it yet, please click on the link on the description box below this video. Hello and welcome to my review on Still Life. It's been a while since I've done a review on adventure games since Grim Fandango on my Tim Schafer tribute review, but I think Still Life deserves some recognition. This game is for the PC and Xbox. The version I'm reviewing on is on the Xbox, but I'll explain the differences between those two ports later on in this review. Still Life is a sequel to a game called Postmortem, which was released in 2003, but I haven't played it yet. But I doubt that you have to play Postmortem first before Still Life. You play as a young FBI agent, Special Agent Victoria McPherson, who's investigating a series of brutal murders in 2004 Chicago. It's around the Christmas holidays when the series of murders are taking place. And let me first say, for those who are in a faint of heart, you must be aware that there's a lot of disturbing imagery in this game where you see naked corpses, really dark and cold atmosphere, brutal violence, and a lot of graphic material that deserves its M rating. It would have been a survival horror game, but there's no action or enemies to kill, but a lot of puzzles to solve, which is what an adventure game should be about. As the story goes along, the FBI has no idea what's going on or what's going to happen next, that Victoria decided to take the case at a more serious level than anyone part of the case. But as they wait for the next move the murderer is going to make, she constantly returns home where she lives with her father and finds out that her grandfather, private investigator Gustav McPherson, has done an exact similar case 70 years ago in 1920s Prague, the capital of Czech Republic. Gustav McPherson was the main character of the prequel, Postmortem, and I'm not too sure if this story carries on what Postmortem left off. So in Still Life, you constantly change characters to present day, playing as Victoria, and back to the past as Gus. And as you go along, both sides of the story gets closer and closer to solving their cases. It's almost episodic to another game like Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, where in there you also change characters as you read another biography. But here, you're reading Gus's biography and his journey of solving the case and back to Victoria again. But let me get back to the details of who the murderer is without getting into spoilers, because he's not killing random people for the typical cliche revenge or money. No. In this case, the murderer targets sex trade workers, street prostitutes in Prague, and employees of an exclusive Chicago massage parlor and S&M club. The killer is disguised in a dark cloak, top hat, and wearing a silver mask. For the reasons why the murderers are taking place, you have to find it out yourself because the game's plot gets better and better as for almost every adventure game I've played. The plot is very slow, but it's a good thing because you get a chance to know more about the characters, feel the intensity of each murder being made, the unpredictability, and many clever puzzling challenges the game has to offer, and you get more of your hours of gameplay out of it. I love the characters in this game as they all played a very good part of the story, except for Victoria's father who's always at home. I especially love Victoria, who is very charming and at times very humorous. It's one of those things that got my attention because of the main character. She's always willing to take risks and do what's right when other people refuse to do so. As much of a badass she actually is, she has a real soft spot for stuffed animals and cute stuff. And you can never expect that from an FBI agent. But most importantly, she does a lot of things that no other female video game character has ever done, making me laugh. She has countless of memorable quotes, and I laughed a lot at her cheesy jokes. One of them I will always remember is when she went to the camera room and took a look at the Playboy calendar and instantly said,
"Miss December, wow. Even God would say, I didn't make those."
I just can't believe a straight woman just said that. Hold that thought, just stay right there. Victoria McPherson, will you marry me? I like Gus too, but my major criticism with his side of the story is that it doesn't really feel like he's in another country because the characters in Prague all sound American. I think Microids wanted to because gamers who stuck with one language would be bored with the story hearing a different language that they're not familiar with. But Gus's side of the story is definitely more atmospheric, as it does fit the environment, having cold and disturbing atmosphere. Victoria's journey, however, does feel urban, but since her side of the story is set in the Christmas season, you can see snow and warm atmosphere in most places. I really, and I do mean really, love the design in this game, as there are plenty of places that are one part very disturbing and another feeling warm and cozy feeling, such as Victoria's house. But just looking at how well designed such as the house is, I have to say that I want a house just like this. And that's something that a lot of adventure games has to offer, well creative level design. Each area in the game is almost like a painting. This is quite something, a work of art, because it's almost like the designers had a lot of raw emotion putting into it. I mean, the way to design the corpses and lighting and shading, I love it when games are like this. When I said that this game was slow paced, that's because it's going back and forth in location to location, trying to find something or talk to another character to get somewhere in order to continue onward. One thing in Still Life that will slow down the game for players, like every adventure game in existence, are the puzzles. But there are some puzzles in this game that are relatively easy, and some that are very challenging that you need to use all your brain power to get past through. It's challenges like this that makes me appreciate how Microids took the adventure fans quite seriously. I mean, there are puzzles in this game that took me months to solve. I would have given up the game, but my curiosity of how the game ends and finding out who was the murderer was through the roof. If it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't do a review on this game now, would I? One of my favorite puzzles in this game that has nothing to do with the plot was when Victoria was cooking cookies for her dad. For something as simple to do in real life, it is easy, but the cookbook that Victoria is using in here were all just girly words like 1 cup of love, a half a cup of generosity, 2 cups of commitment, and so on that I couldn't figure out as a guy. But when I asked my mom what each of these words mean, she helped me out. Generosity means butter, commitment means flour, and so on that made me learn something interesting. However, there are puzzles in this game like matching slide pictures that I desperately hate that are in games like Resident Evil 4 and The Wind Waker. However, there are puzzles that are in later in the game that I never quite seen in adventure games, and Still Life applied it well. What I mean is that since this game is set in a case, you use real life police equipment to find evidence and solve cases in which real policemen actually do, such as shooting pictures of evidence, finding fingerprints, and so much more, in which it really does feel like you're solving an actual case. But let me add one more criticism on Still Life. Out of all the adventure games I've played, Still Life has the least features of choosing your character's dialogue when interacting with a character. In other adventure games, you have plenty of choices for your character to choose to say, ask, or respond to another character. But here, you only have 2 choices, on topic and off topic. I think Microids couldn't afford spending too much time on putting as much dialogue choices, and made this more of a straightforward game. But there are times when interacting with a character that I would love to ask different questions and to know what I'm going to say rather than just pressing a button on topic or off topic, and it's kind of underwhelming to see that this is all we got for dialogue. But that's all my gripes I have with Still Life in general. In the beginning of this review, I said that there are 2 ports of Still Life, PC and Xbox, and they both have different gameplay. In the PC, it's basically a point-and-click adventure game, but on the Xbox, it's not a point-and-click adventure game, but rather an adventure subgenre which I call full 3D graphic adventure. Still Life on the Xbox has a non-mouse interface where you move your character with full control like Grim Fandango and Shenmue. Microids did a right move when porting this game on the Xbox, because playing point-and-click adventure games with the analog stick is not fun at all. I know most adventure game fans would choose the PC because of the simplicity of point-and-click gameplay, but I like the Xbox overall mainly because I'm a big fan of Grim Fandango so much that any adventure games that has this style of gameplay is my cup of tea. But I can tell you one thing that the PC has over the Xbox port. In certain areas of the game, you go in first person and you have a cursor to move where you want to select. It sucks to drag your cursor with an analog stick to get anywhere, and in the PC version, it's just smooth to use the mouse. So, to wrap up this review, here is my opinion on Still Life. I only paid $2 for this game at my favorite retro store. At first I had little anticipation for what is to come in this game, but after finishing it, I have to say that it's worth way more than what I bargained for. This has to be one of my favorite adventure games despite the criticisms. The crime plot is out of anything that an episode of CSI can ever pull off, and the puzzle challenge offered in this game was brainstorming nonetheless. There are a lot of similarities to a game called Heavy Rain, but if you ask me which one of those games I would pick Still Life, mainly because the characters aren't retarded, there aren't any QuickTime events that annoys the fuck out of me, and the execution of telling a story is much better here in Still Life. Most admirable about this game is the level designs, where each level of the game is very well crafted in its own way. Just wait until you get to the art museum, you'll be seeing work of art that is very dark and disturbing. Just looking at each image of the game is just pure raw emotion by the minds of the creators, and that's what you call a work of art. Overall, if you're an adventure game fan, I would strongly recommend you to play this game. But if you're one of those gamers who just wants mindless action, look somewhere else. So my overall score for Still Life is a 4 fingers out of 5. I hope you guys liked this review, and to wrap up this review, here is my top 5 quotes from Victoria McPherson, and you can see why she is my favorite female video game character ever. Number 5!
To find out who the gunman was behind the grassy knoll, please call 555-1963. Now that's tasteless.
Number 4!
Teddy and I used to be inseparable.
Number 3!
Sorry.
Number 2!
Miss December, wow. Even God would say, I didn't make those.
Number 1!
This is bullshit.
You're only proving my point.
You know, Browning, I usually get kissed before I get fucked.